Good morning. Today is Thursday, November 21st, 2024. Today is the 20th day of Cheshvan on the Jewish calendar. Today is the Yartzeit, the fourth Yartzeit of Rabbi Jonathan Sachs. How we could have benefited from Rabbi Sachs's wisdom and encouragement and inspiration over this past year. I feel today his loss maybe even more than I did in the past. But he leaves us with a wealth of teachings which are still relevant to us, and in whose memory and as a tribute to his greatness, I want to share something that I learned from Rabbi Sachs in his memory. Avraham and Sarah initiate a new way of serving God through chesed, through acts of kindness and acts of empathy with God's children, all of God's children. It was the essence of their lives, and it was the core of their personality, and we have seen this and discussed this several times in the last couple of weeks. And it was so pervasive that when Avram sends Eliezer, his servant Eliezer, to find a wife for Yitzchak, Eliezer, according to the text of the Torah, intuits on his own what the criteria must be for this woman who will marry Yitzchak, who will be the daughter-in-law of Abraham and Sarah. He intuits it on his own, that she must be a woman who is suffused with chesed, with kindness, abundant kindness, going beyond what even a nice person would do, but looking for ways to provide kindness to a stranger. He intuits this on his own and makes up this test as a prayer to God that when he finds such a woman, she should be the woman that is fit for Yitzchak and fit for the household of Avraham. Because that's obviously the most important criteria. The lesson for us is that we can never underestimate the impact we have on others with even the smallest gesture. When we do a kindness for another person, even if to us it seems like it was small, we can never underestimate how much that means to the other person. And learning about Abraham and Sarah, learning about how Eliezer understood this characteristic, and about the kindness of Rivka that we learn about in our Torah portion, Chayesara, should be a very important reminder in our lives that so often it takes so little to be kind to another person, to be sensitive to another person. Sometimes, many times, it's so easy. But the effects can change people's lives. So I heard this story from Rabbi Jonathan Sachs, but it happens that I know the person in this story. Listen to the story that Rabbi Sachs tells. In 1966, an 11-year-old black boy moved with his parents and family to a white neighborhood in Washington, D.C. Sitting with his two brothers and two sisters on the front step of the house, he waited to see how they would be greeted. They were not. Passers-by turned to look at them, but no one gave them a smile or even a glance of recognition. All the fearful stories he had heard about how whites treated blacks seemed to be coming true. And years later, writing about those first days in their new home, he wrote, "I knew we were not welcome here. I knew we would not be liked here. I knew we would have no friends here. I knew we should not have moved here." Now, as this 11-year-old boy is thinking these thoughts, a white woman, coming home from work, passed by on the other side of the street. And she turned to the children sitting on their step, and with a wide smile, she said to them, "Welcome." She went into her home across the street, and a few minutes later she came out with a big tray filled with cold drinks and sandwiches, which she brought over to the children, making them feel at home. And this young man later wrote, "That moment changed my life. It gave me a sense of belonging where there had been none before. It made me realize, at a time when race relations in the United States were still fraught, that a black family could feel at home in a white area, and that there could be relationships that were colorblind. That first spontaneous act of greeting became, for me, a definitive memory. It broke down a wall of separation and turned strangers into friends." He wrote, "That small gesture changed my life." That young man is Stephen Carter. Eventually, he became a law professor at Yale University Law School. He and I were teaching at Yale Law School at the same time, and we knew each other. We worked together on several projects. I did not know this story about him during the time that I knew him. I only learned this story later. But I can tell you firsthand that Stephen is a remarkable person, an incredible scholar and teacher. He's also a great writer. He has written both novels and nonfiction, and I highly recommend his work to you. His novels are great. His nonfiction is very important. And we spent a lot of time together speaking about my class on Jewish law that I taught at Yale, a subject about which he was very knowledgeable and interested. He is a fascinating man. Now later, he wrote a book about what he learned that day, titled Civility. I recommend that to you as well. And he writes in that book that it was no coincidence that this woman from across the street was a religious Jew. He writes, in the Jewish tradition, such civility is called chesed, the doing of acts of kindness, which is in turn derived from the understanding that human beings are made in the image of God. B'Tselem Elokim. And he writes, to this day, I can close my eyes and feel on my tongue the smooth, slick sweetness of the cream cheese and jelly sandwiches that I gobbled on that summer afternoon when I discovered how a single act of genuine and unassuming civility can change a life forever. Always remember and never forget how a single act of chesed, of kindness, empathy to another person, can change a life forever. Thank you to Stephen Carter for sharing this story with us. And thank you, Rabbi Jonathan Sachs of blessed memory, for letting us understand it within the context of our tradition going back to Avraham and Sarah. May his memory be a blessing for us always. My friends, I wish you a great day, and I look forward to seeing you soon in person.